My hands were greasy, the smell of engine oil clinging to my skin, a scent I'd known since childhood. Dad's workshop, a cramped space filled with the clang of tools and the hiss of pneumatics, had been my second home. Even as a kid, I'd spend hours watching him, fascinated by the intricate dance of gears and pistons. It wasn't just a job for him, it was an art form. So, naturally, when it came time for college, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. Automobile engineering, a fancy title for getting my hands dirty, just like Dad. He was proud, I could tell, even if he didn't say much, and when I joined him at the workshop at 23, officially a qualified mechanic, it felt like the culmination of years of admiration and learning. The place was different then. Smaller, just Dad, and a couple of part-time guys. One lift, a handful of clients. But I had ideas, new strategies, a vision for something bigger. Over the next decade, we grew. More staff, more lifts, more clients. The revenue skyrocketed. Dad, he mostly stuck to the workshop floor, his happy place. Me? I was the one pushing for expansion, managing the books, dealing with suppliers. 20/80 split, workshop to office. It was my life, this business, my baby. And I thought, foolishly, that it would one day be mine, not just in practice, but officially. That all the sweat and tears, the late nights and stressful deadlines, would lead to me inheriting the fruits of my labor. That's how it was supposed to work, right? The family business, passed down the line. But family, as I would soon learn, is a complicated beast, especially when it comes to siblings. My dad's favoritism towards my brother had always been a simmering undercurrent in our family. Jerry, the golden boy, the one who got pneumonia as a kid and wrapped Dad around his finger. I was the dutiful son, the one who loved cars, who worked hard, who wanted to carry on the family legacy. But I was also the forgotten one, the second choice. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when Dad seemed genuinely proud of me, but then came Jerry's illness, and something shifted. It was subtle at first, a lingering glance, a slightly louder laugh when Jerry spoke. Over the years, it grew more pronounced. One night, I remember vividly, I'd won an award at school, a big one. I was so proud, and I wanted to share it with my family. Mom hugged me, Dad smiled, and I beamed. Then I asked about the school's awards ceremony. Mom couldn't go, night shift, but Dad? I expected him to be there. He hesitated. Basketball with Jerry, he mumbled, eyes flicking towards Mom. She huffed, but didn't push. The night before, I reminded him, and he promised. But the next day, I scanned the crowd, searching for Dad's familiar face. He never showed. Later, there was a huge fight at home. Mom was furious, Dad defensive. Jerry, eating ice cream, was oblivious. He'd missed the ceremony because he wanted ice cream. My dad, instead of apologizing, tried to downplay it. It was just an award, he said. That's when it hit me. Not just the missed ceremony, but the lack of support. The feeling that my achievements didn't matter. Dad, the man I'd always looked up to, had failed me. And in that moment, I felt a deep, aching betrayal. Years passed, and the cracks in our relationship widened. There were more instances of favoritism, little things that cut deeper than you'd think. And then, 5 months ago, the bombshell dropped. Dad was getting married to a woman younger than me without even telling us. And worse, he announced that he was giving the business to Jerry. I was stunned, furious. All those years of hard work, building the business alongside Dad, and it was just handed to my brother? It didn't matter that I wasn't married, didn't have kids. To Dad, it seemed like I didn't deserve it. I left that night, the weight of betrayal heavy on my shoulders. I started my own business, and surprisingly, the clients followed. My dad's business floundered, and he eventually had to sell it. Now here I am, years later. My business is thriving, I'm happy with my girlfriend, and I've distanced myself from my family. It's not an easy choice, but sometimes you have to put yourself first. The betrayal cut deep, like a jagged blade twisting in my gut. All those years, all that sweat and toil, dismissed with a wave of Dad's hand. Jerry, the golden child, got the prize, while I was left with nothing but resentment and a burning desire to prove them wrong. I poured my anger and frustration into my new venture. Days bled into nights, fueled by coffee and the unwavering support of my girlfriend, Sarah. She was my rock, my confidant, the one person who truly believed in me. Word spread quickly. Clients, old and new, flocked to my workshop. They knew me, trusted me, valued my work ethic. It was a vindication, a middle finger to my father and brother. They'd underestimated me, thought I'd crumble without them. Instead, I rose from the ashes, stronger and more determined than ever. My dad, meanwhile, watched his empire crumble. Jerry, with no real passion or understanding of the business, struggled to keep clients happy. The workshop, once a hive of activity, grew quiet. The phone stopped ringing. The lift stood empty. I heard whispers, of course, family friends, pitying glances, hushed conversations. My dad had made a mistake, a colossal miscalculation. He'd gambled on the wrong son, and now he was paying the price. One evening, Mom called. She'd always been the peacemaker, the voice of reason. But this time, her voice was laced with anger. "He's called you an asshole," she spat. "Blamed you for everything." I wasn't surprised. It was easier for him to point fingers than to admit his own failings. He'd built a narrative in his head, one where I was the villain, the ungrateful son who'd abandoned the family. But I knew the truth. I'd been pushed aside, discarded like a broken tool. And now, I was building something better, something that was truly mine. It wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about proving to myself and to the world that I didn't need their approval. I could stand on my own 2 feet, and I would succeed, despite them. The success was sweet, no doubt. My workshop hummed with activity, the air thick with the smell of grease and ambition. Loyal clients, skilled mechanics, a steady stream of revenue. It was everything I'd ever wanted. But there was a hollowness to it, a lingering ache that refused to fade. The victory felt tainted somehow. I'd built this empire, yes, but at what cost? My family was fractured, the bond with my father irreparably broken. One day he called. His voice was weary, defeated. He wanted to see me, to talk. I hesitated. Part of me craved reconciliation, a chance to hear him admit his mistakes. But another part, the wounded, angry part, wanted nothing to do with him. Curiosity won out. I drove to his house, a place filled with childhood memories, now shrouded in a heavy silence. He looked older, smaller. The bravado was gone, replaced by a vulnerability I'd never seen before. He apologized in his way, not for the favoritism, not for the betrayal, but for the misunderstanding. He spoke of family, of loyalty, of the importance of sticking together. It was a thinly veiled plea for help, a desperate attempt to salvage what was left of his pride. I listened, my heart a knot of conflicting emotions, anger, pity, a deep, abiding sadness. This was my father, the man who'd taught me everything I knew. And now, he was a shadow of his former self, broken and lost. I didn't offer the forgiveness he sought. I couldn't. The wounds were too deep, the scars too fresh. But I also didn't gloat, didn't rub his nose in his failure. I simply said my piece, calmly and firmly, and then I left. Driving home, I felt a strange mix of relief and regret. The conversation had been necessary, a way to close a chapter. But it hadn't brought the closure I'd hoped for. The rift remained, a gaping chasm between us. The victory, I realized, was bittersweet. I'd proven myself, built something extraordinary. But the price had been steep, and as I looked towards the future, I knew that the shadow of my father's betrayal would always linger, a reminder of the fragility of family and the enduring power of resentment. Time, they say, heals all wounds, but some scars, they linger. The ache of my father's betrayal dulled, but it never truly vanished. I carried it with me, a constant reminder of the fragility of trust and the complexities of family. My business thrived. Sarah and I were married, a small ceremony filled with laughter and genuine warmth. She was my anchor, my safe harbor in the storm. And slowly, life began to find a new rhythm. One day, Mom called. Her voice was subdued, heavy with sadness. Dad was sick, she said. Not the kind of sick that heals with time and rest. The kind that steals your strength, your memories, your very essence. I went to see him. He was frail, a ghost of the man I once knew. His eyes, once bright and full of life, were clouded with confusion. He didn't recognize me at first, his gaze flitting around the sterile hospital room. Then, a flicker of recognition. A weak smile touched his lips. "My boy," he whispered, his voice raspy. We sat in silence, the weight of unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. I didn't know what to say, how to bridge the chasm that separated us. He reached out, his hand trembling. I took it, his grip surprisingly strong. "I'm sorry," he mumbled, his eyes filled with a deep, unfathomable sadness. And in that moment, something shifted within me. The anger, the resentment, the years of hurt. It all seemed to melt away. He was a broken man, facing his mortality. And all that mattered was that he was my father. I didn't speak of forgiveness, didn't dredge up the past. I simply sat with him, holding his hand, offering a silent comfort. He drifted in and out of consciousness, his grip tightening whenever I tried to leave. He passed away a few days later. There were no grand pronouncements, no dramatic reconciliations, just a quiet fading, a peaceful surrender. At the funeral, Jerry approached me. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face etched with grief. He spoke of regret, of missed opportunities, of the brotherly bond we'd lost. I listened, offering a small, hesitant smile. We were both wounded, both grappling with the loss of our father. And in that shared grief, a fragile understanding emerged. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't about forgetting. It was about letting go of the anger, the bitterness, the need for retribution. It was about acknowledging the flaws, the mistakes, the complexities of human nature. I didn't forgive my father for his favoritism, for the pain he'd caused. I forgave him for being human, for being imperfect, for being my dad. And in that forgiveness, I found a measure of peace, a way to finally move forward. Life, it seems, has a way of surprising you. Just when you think you've found your footing, the ground shifts beneath your feet. But with each tremor, with each unexpected turn, comes a chance to grow, to learn, to redefine what truly matters. The years following Dad's passing were a time of healing, of rebuilding. Jerry and I, bound by a shared loss and a newfound understanding, slowly rekindled our brotherly bond. It wasn't easy. There were awkward silences, lingering resentments, and the occasional flare-up of old wounds. But with time and patience, we found a way to navigate the complexities of our relationship. Mom, bless her heart, was our constant. Her unwavering love and support provided a steady anchor in the turbulent waters of grief and reconciliation. She was the glue that held us together, the gentle reminder of the enduring power of family. My business continued to flourish. Sarah and I were blessed with 2 beautiful children, their laughter filling our home with a joy that chased away the shadows of the past. I found a sense of fulfillment in providing for them, in building a legacy that was truly my own. One crisp autumn afternoon, while reminiscing with Mom about Dad, a realization struck me. His favoritism, his misguided attempts to control our destinies, stemmed from a place of love. However flawed, he wanted the best for us in his own way. And while his actions caused pain and resentment, they also inadvertently shaped me into the man I am today. The anger I once felt towards him transformed into a quiet understanding. I saw his flaws, his shortcomings, but also his strengths, his love for his sons. And in that recognition, I found a sense of peace, a way to honor his memory without condoning his mistakes. The legacy he left behind wasn't the business, the material possessions, or the tangled web of family drama. It was the lessons learned, the resilience forged, and the unwavering determination to create a better future for myself and my loved ones. As I watch my children play, their laughter echoing through the house, I'm filled with a profound sense of gratitude. The path I've walked has been fraught with challenges, with betrayals and disappointments, but it has also led me to a place of contentment, of love, of a hard-won peace. And in that, I find the true meaning of family, of legacy, of life itself. Story 2. After having my sister, my parents sent me away. After she failed, they phoned me 12 years later to demonstrate their parental skills. Before I was 8, my parents abandoned me and sent me to live with my aunt. I was aware of their dislike for me. I was essentially their problem. I saw them try to build a life while raising me, and they were in their early 20s, just beginning their careers. I believe they resented me, but I just lately recognized this. At the time, I didn't know why they detested me. Throughout my early years, I tried in vain to win their approval. They disregarded my feelings. They act differently with friends and relatives, though. They were unable to communicate the terrible state of affairs to anyone. They even persuaded me to remain silent for fear of increasing their distaste for me. My emotional and mental well-being deteriorated throughout the years. I had behavioral issues and struggled in school. I don't hold myself responsible for my challenging upbringing. If I had received better treatment from my parents, I would have behaved differently. They failed despite reprimanding, grounding, and punishing me. I started misbehaving more to get my professors' attention after they voiced concerns about my conduct in grades. Try being terrible if being nice doesn't work. This plan didn't work. Around the time I was 8, Mom became pregnant once more. For the first time in many years, my parents were overjoyed. The notification of my birthday celebration was unclear to me. Weeks later, as my mother was packing my bags, I found out. After sitting me down, my father informed me that I would be living with my aunt. I wasn't doing well there, so he stated it was for my own benefit. I was young, but not stupid. They were ditching me, and I knew it. Replacement was on her way with a new child. After experiencing heartbreak, I threw tantrums. Even if they mistreated me, I wanted to be with my parents, friends, and relatives. My outbursts didn't matter to them. I was transported out of state to live with my aunt. I pleaded with my parents to let me remain because I was miserable on the trip. I made a commitment to raise my conduct and grades, but they were predetermined. Back then, even though I was the greatest kid, I hadn't thought that this could not be related to my conduct or academics. They may have despised me. I was still upset even after my parents helped me spend a few days at my aunt's place, but my aunt helped me get used to it. She could be the most lovely and compassionate person in the world. Being the oldest of 4 siblings and my dad's older sister, my aunt reared me since she had never married or had kids. She worked on the farm where their parents abandoned them, while her siblings were employed elsewhere. She told me that everything would be okay, and that I would love the apartment once I got to know it, even though she knew I was upset about moving in. Her comments were quite helpful to me. My parents departed after 2 days, and I started crying. My only source of assistance was my aunt. She kept calling my parents to try to cheer me up, but they seldom ever answered. My aunt remained with me as I sobbed for 2 weeks. After a while, I felt better. After a few months, I stopped missing my parents since living with her was so much better. I was doing better after going to school and working on the farm. After my parents transferred me overseas, I made plenty of friends, handled my studies, and, like my professors, my life got better. Despite the fact that we occasionally met when on vacation, I knew that I would be better off without them. I was a mischievous child in need of a change of scenery. My parents then informed my aunt that I would be moving in. After a few months, I thanked her for taking me in, and informed her that my parents had mistreated me and never wanted me. My aunt's treatment of my parents changed after that. She became aloof and colder. We then encountered them at family gatherings and events. However, we haven't performed much in 12 years. They don't care, and I'm happier without them. It's probably better that I don't have any contact with my sister, who is 12 years old. Her upbringing is not nice, according to other family members. In 12, she has a negative attitude and is among the worst troublemakers in school. I don't have that problem. My parents do. I'm having a good life. In order to manage the farm once my aunt retires, I'm attending college to earn a business degree. It's nice that I can come home every weekend because college is nearby. Since they couldn't get through to me directly, my parents contacted my aunt last weekend when I was at home. For the first time in over 12 years, we had a formal phone conversation. They made an absurd request. It wasn't nice as a result. When my aunt gave me the phone, I was intrigued. Following a brief conversation about my life, my parents expressed their pride in my development. They went on to say that they wanted to try fatherhood again. After I graduated, they invited me to move in and keep in contact. I couldn't see them asking for this, so I was taken aback. I asked them why they felt the need to have me return. They then claimed that my sister was to blame. To their embarrassment, my sister seems to have been an even more challenging child than I was. They wanted me to get back in touch and prove to their relatives and friends that they were capable of raising amazing children. It wasn't about getting back together. It was about using me as evidence that they were wonderful parents. People I believe judge them. Like me, my sister is turning into a troublemaker. They have to be decent parents. You're crazy to want me back. They did, however, want me to think about it. I informed them over the phone that I wouldn't come back and that I wouldn't help them convince their friends and relatives of anything. They agreed with me when I informed them I was done with them. I've previously talked about how bad things were with my parents, and how much better things were once I moved in with my aunt. They, not troublesome kids, seemed to be the issue. Saying they raised me would be a lie since they didn't. My aunt did a good job at the job. I wouldn't allow them to recognize her work. The majority of our family members and friends were aware of my aunt's concern about me. In spite of this, my parents intended to pretend that they had stayed in contact with me and paid me frequent visits. They were left alone after I promised not to aid in the dissemination of this false information. They created a fit, claiming to have helped my aunt and me for 12 years. Rather, they sent a payment every month that hardly covers anything. Despite never complaining, my aunt always covered the remaining amount herself. With their little efforts, they were now attempting to seem sympathetic. It was humiliating for them to tell me that my sister had failed. Since they were my parents, I was obligated to assist them. That's when I lost it. I informed them that they were no longer my family, and that they were not my parents. Since my aunt was my sole relative, I told them to leave me and her alone. Hi everyone, this is an update. The majority of you agreed on NTA when I originally wrote 2 days ago. I'm grateful for it, because it clarified for me that the only reason I felt self-doubt was because my parents had done all they could to make me believe that what I had stated the week before was incorrect. They gave the impression that I was purposefully nasty. To be honest, I didn't think I said anything offensive or disrespectful. I realized after reading the comments that they were attempting to coerce me into fulfilling their demands and going back home to brag about their excellent parenting. It's annoying that they continue to call me from different accounts and phone numbers even after I've blocked them. I was urged to ignore it by my aunt. If I was correct, she said, there was no need to apologize. She also questioned a few relatives about why my parents felt the need to demonstrate that they were good parents all of a sudden. She found out what had transpired at that point. 2 weeks ago, at my sister's 12th birthday celebration, I learned that she smoked, and my parents attempted to take away her cigarette. She became so furious that my mother started crying. At the celebration, my mom's elder sister, grandparents, and other family members informed her that their 12-year-old daughter had a cigarette as a result of their poor parenting. They said that by taking more initiative, my parents might have avoided this. My sister has been pampered by my parents since she was a little child. I now know that they never turned her away, provided her a sizable stipend, and let her do everything she wanted without supervision. She was aware that everything she did would get away with it. Thus, they were dominated by my 12-year-old sister. Many friends and family members chastised them for parenting her badly since they wanted to show themselves after the cigarette incident. Decent parents. My parents want me to return so they can show how successful they are. They wish to show me off as a gift. Their actions are pathetic. Above all, they ought to understand that this tactic is ineffective as everyone is aware that my aunt raised me. My parents' choice to send me away when I wasn't doing well was not even supported by my aunt's contacts. When your children are having difficulties, you should support them rather than turn a blind eye. After my sister was born, they had frequently counseled my parents to bring me back so that we might grow up together. My parents disregarded it, claiming that my aunt knew best and that I was better with her. How, or whether my parents can think about others, is beyond me. They may just dismiss my sister as a failure in an attempt to win me back. I'm afraid of her age of 12. I believe she could get back on track with only therapy. My parents shouldn't be my mentors, in my opinion. They took me away because they said they wanted to save her time, money, and effort. But this is how they have brought her up and handled her. I don't think they care about us, even if they claim to sacrifice their oldest child for her. My parents weren't destined to be parents, in my opinion. Given that our parents gave my sister everything I never had, I might easily be angry with her. Time, money, love, care, and devotion. For my part, I'm sorry for her. Raising a child correctly requires more than all of that. The fact that my parents failed both of their children surprises me more. Since I don't want to speak with them, I hope they stop phoning and contacting me. Following the lessons I learned from my aunt and other family members, I'll let them know the next time they guilt trip me. Update 2. I haven't spoken for a few days, but I will tell my parents that they did if they attempt to guilt me again. 2 hours ago, I received a call from a new number. As soon as I picked up, I was instructed to apologize and go home. I was grumpy and felt ill today. I lost my temper when that phone call made things worse. I yelled at them that because what I had stated was accurate, I would not apologize. My parents weren't them. That was a label they had not earned. Since my aunt reared me, I would refer to her as my family. They hadn't seen me in 12 years, I told them. They didn't pay attention to me before. If they can't accept that I don't consider them family, they should put the burden on themselves. To make me feel bad about something I don't have to do, they should cease calling me. They cut me off, stating that we shouldn't forget that my aunt supported us while she raised me. I claimed that my costs were barely covered by the money they gave. The money from my parents was worthless, because my aunt paid for almost everything on her own. They wouldn't have been required to pay child support if they had kept me. They ought to stop pretending that giving my aunt money was a huge favor. After transferring their kid to her, I told them that child support was the very minimum. Out of love, she hid this from the family, despite the fact that she may have damaged their reputation. Since money isn't everything, they ought to quit discussing their expenditures. They ought to have learned that lesson from the event at my sister's birthday party. Their younger daughter, who is now a spoilt brat, also received money from them. My parents failed, yet they labeled her a failure. They let us both down. When I mentioned that, they became defensive. They said that I didn't comprehend why my sister was joyful. They stated the event during her birthday celebration was a one-time occurrence, but since they can, I know that contented children, particularly those aged 12 and over, abstain from smoking. I didn't think they were trying to raise my sister when I told them that they were most likely trying to persuade themselves. They made the identical errors with her and me, just in the opposite order. They lavished her with money and excessive care while neglecting me. During their time with her, they failed to properly govern her. Despite never having met the child, I was aware of this. They showed how little they cared for their children by contacting me to demonstrate that they were good parents. Instead of being wonderful parents, they wanted to appear like them. Maybe they couldn't handle this much truth. I was scolded, cursed at, and told I didn't know what I was talking about. Their outbursts and defensiveness confirmed my correctness. After a few more minutes of argument, they said that they were happy that they had sent me away years prior. I wasn't good enough to be their son, so they claimed they were happy they chose their daughter. Maybe they hung up out of concern that I might be offended by their farewells. I didn't give a damn. They wouldn't have used such derogatory language if I hadn't won the argument, so I was relieved. I now hope they reconsider before arguing or phoning me once again. My only complaint is that I can't help my sister. She might live without my parents' awful environment, which makes me sad. However, you can win and lose at times. The third update. I haven't spoken to my parents in a week. They didn't bother me again after that last phone call, which is more advantageous to them. According to what I understand, they have been informing the family that my sister's cigarette incident was an isolated incident that will never occur again. However, no one is tricked. There could be more going on with her. Her first cigarette could have been this one. Who knows what more she has done, though. The sole culprits were my parents. It was clear that this resulted from their lack of discipline and oversight. I typically don't pass judgment on people I don't know, but my parents are deserving. What type of people would leave one child behind while expecting another? Who? My folks, I'm overjoyed. Now that they see how shattered they are, my family is avoiding me. My aunt has now opened up about why they left me with her after years of keeping quiet. They preferred to spend more time with their other child. Therefore, they didn't want me around. Not because I was an unruly child. Not me. But my parents made me a troublesome child. I wouldn't have prospered after moving away if I were at fault. Because she didn't want to ruin my parents' image, my aunt kept this a secret for 12 years. However, because of their defensiveness, she now believes they deserve it. People already dread my parents. There is clear denial about parental failure. Now everyone is aware that my parents are to blame. They left me with my aunt after they heard our story. Neither my sister nor I are worthy of them. We don't need to kick them while they're down because some people think we're overreacting. But if they hadn't phoned me to help them act like amazing parents, this wouldn't have occurred. They are deserving. There is a significant update when you post again after 2 weeks. My sister's custody is under dispute between my sister's maternal grandparents. I've always kept in touch with the majority of my family, even though my parents sent me to live with my aunt. My grandparents and I get along well, so when they called a few days ago to inquire about my parents, I told them I was thrilled. At last, I informed them about my parents' abuse. For years, they thought my parents had good reason to send me away. They now understand that there is no need to detain your child. I told them that was all right, and they expressed regret for not learning the truth sooner. I didn't appear to be in pain, but everyone struggles. Without being informed, it would have been difficult to know. Other family members accused me of mistreating my sister after the cigarette incident, which my grandparents learned about. After dropping me off at her place, my aunt eventually told me about my parents' abandonment. After learning of this, my grandparents made the decision to look into it. Their younger grandchild shouldn't have gone through what I had. They spoke with me and found my parents were unchanged. They were still more concerned with looking like excellent parents than with actually being there for their children. My grandparents then battled for custody of my sister in order to raise her in a different way. I support the decision. After I moved away from my parents, my life became better, and I have no doubt that hers will too. My sister seems indifferent to the interim custody that has been granted to them. Her lack of interest gives me hope that she will move on. My grandparents will let my parents visit, but they think they will soon get full custody. The best aspect is that my sister has begun to show interest in me. We had a phone conversation a few days ago. She seems happy to speak with me, yet I've heard that our parents warned her for years not to speak to me as I was a negative influence. Now that she's warming up, I hope we can develop a strong friendship, optimistic about the future. I appreciate you watching. Please click the notification bell if you haven't already, in order to receive updates on additional startling real-life stories that are happening in your area.